Good morning, everyone, and welcome back to another weekend workshop. Today, we are privileged to have back, by popular demand, Judith Pineault, who, of course, many of you know and love. You've worked with her. She has delivered workshops for us in the past. And today, we're going to be focusing on sustainable profits, and we're going to look at mastering your strategic pricing. And we know that this is a topic that comes up so often in the weekend community. So we're so excited to get into it. But just before we do, if I haven't met you before, my name is Carrie Ramsey, and I am the project manager for the We Can project, which is led by Queen's University. And some of you might not know this, but over the last 4 years or so, we have served more than 1,500 women identifying entrepreneurs in the greater Kingston and Quinte region. And let me say, it has been just an amazing journey with all of you. And I know that some of you are back today for probably, I don't know, your 50th workshop. We've had more than 100 of these. So even if you've only come to half of them, we've seen your faces often, and it's so wonderful to have you back. Let's go ahead and take a moment in the Zoom chat to connect with each other, because of course this is a great networking opportunity as well as an opportunity to learn from Judith today. Let us know, where are you connecting from? What is your business? If you have a link to your website or your LinkedIn profile, however you would like us to connect with you, let us know. And when I say us, I mean the whole group. And you just never know where these opportunities are going to lead with people you meet today. So go ahead and do that. While you're connecting in the Zoom chat, I'll acknowledge that Queen's University is situated on the ancestral territory of the Anishinaabe and the Haudenosaunee peoples. And I love to give the land acknowledgement at the beginning of all of our sessions, and I try not to make it exactly the same every time. So today what I want to do, since we're a group of women, I want to make a book recommendation. If you're interested in learning more about Indigenous heritage, culture, from a female perspective particularly, I highly recommend a book called Becoming a Matriarch by Helen Knott. She is a BC author, and right now it's a #1 national bestseller. And so just in case you're wondering what it's about, here's one quick sentence. When matriarchs begin to disappear, there is a choice to either step into the places they left behind or craft a new space. And I just highly recommend this book. Again, I think that our bookshelves should be as diverse as the folks that we spend our time with, because we can learn and dive more into Indigenous culture in this case. So I hope that you'll take that, and I will definitely put a link to that book in the Zoom chat once I stop speaking. So check that out. We hope that you will enjoy that book. All right, so without further ado, thanks, by the way, for those who are connecting in the Zoom chat. If you're just joining us, go ahead, let us know where you're connecting from, what your business is, and perhaps include a link. Judith, the floor is yours. We cannot wait to learn from you. We are sitting with pens and notebooks ready to take notes. And of course, we're going to learn from you. I should let you folks know, if you have questions, go ahead and put them in the Zoom chat. And we do have a Q&A at the end, but if there's a burning question, we'll make sure to get it answered. Over to you, Judith. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I can't tell you how thrilled and excited I am to be with everybody here today. My connection with We Can goes back, as Kerry's does, to the beginning of the program. And you guys are my people. I can't tell you what an enriching experience it has been for me over the years to work with each and every one of you. And I tell this kind of story. So my background, I come out of a manufacturing background. And after 30 years as CFO in a custom manufacturing business, very male dominated, but that's a topic for a different day. The business was sold, and it was sold just before Christmas in 2019. And they working up towards that monumental date of actually exiting was kind of incredible. And it being just before Christmas, I said, okay, I'm just going to relax. I'm going to enjoy Christmas with family and friends. And in the new year, I'll start to look and see what's next for me, which is absolutely not what I recommend to others exiting. But again, that's a different story too. And quite coincidentally, just after that happened, I spoke to an old colleague of Kerry's and mine, Janice Maddy, and the Weekend Project was being born. And we were all sat around saying, wow, what an amazing opportunity. And how do we connect with all of these women? And so from that very small beginning, from that nucleus to where we are today, with this this incredible network of 1,500 plus supportive women all looking out for each other. There is nothing that any one of you have faced in business that one of us hasn't already navigated and can help you through it. So it is the most amazing group that I have ever worked with. So anyway, I'm yakking on, but it's such a pleasure to be here. It always is. My style, for those of you who know me, is very participative. So I know Kerry's going to help me today to monitor the chat. But if you absolutely have to jump up and say, ah, and ask a question, please do. So it's a chat we're having today, and it's a prelude to the boot camp. So I do encourage you to have a look at that, because in the boot camp, you'll get much more customized one-on-one information that's relative that you can actually apply to your own businesses. So that's the takeaway. So yeah, today we're talking about pricing. Wow, pricing. Pricing is such a cornerstone of our businesses, isn't it? I get asked often, well, how on earth do we go about establishing what our price is? So we're going to do a little bit of a deep dive into that today. But before we get to that place of nuance around pricing, let's talk a little bit and contextualize it from a higher level. In terms of the impact of pricing on our business and specifically on our profitability. Now, as I mentioned, I come from a very male-dominated background. So I'm used to working with a bunch of guys who are all about profit. And of all of the things that I've learned in working with my female team here today, is that often we as women, we have a different viewpoint around profit. And with the 75 plus women I've now worked with over these few years, I've realized that we really do approach business very, very differently. And I often hear, the capitalist system, and I hear a lot of discomfort around that. And that's not so much where we necessarily fit in. Some of us do. Some of us are very purpose driven to the numbers, and that's okay too. But for those of you here today who might just cringe a little bit when we think of capitalism per se, I have to say this to you. They're not divisible. You can be successful in your business, and I believe this to the core of me, and also provide a societal good and be a good stakeholder in society. So I always talk when we're talking about money, as we are today, and I always put that up there as the caveat first. So I don't want anybody to feel, oh my gosh, she's going to be pushing the capitalist narrative here today, because I'm not. I think there has to be balance in everything in life. However, friends of mine, here's what sometimes we don't always do. We run our businesses, we have to be fair to our client, and we have to charge a fair amount of money. We also have to be fair to us. We have to be fair to us. We have to be fair to our business. We have to be fair if we have employees. So it's a very holistic kind of position that I take on running a business and making a business successful. So bear that in mind. You can make money in your business, look after yourself, look after your family, look after your employees, do some good in this world, and also satisfy obviously the customer, the client. So I think it's important as we walk forward on this kind of topic to understand that that's the place that I come from here. So, all right, I've always said that business is very, very simple, which is probably why it's attractive to me. But anyway, we don't have a lot of leverages actually in running a business to produce profit. And we do have to produce profit. We absolutely do have to produce profit. Otherwise, I'm going to see a show of hands here as to everybody that likes waking up at 2 or 3 in the morning because they just heard that they have no money in their bank account, and they don't know how to meet the payroll, or they don't know how to meet their bills, and their vendors are hounding them. So anybody that enjoys that, and this discussion is not for you, that's okay. I don't know about you, but we've all been there and it happens to all of us in business. That truly is a place nobody wants to be. And in order to avoid ever getting into that position where you are filled with anxiety because of those concerns, we have to look at the framework of how you manage a business and how you work the levers of the business to ensure that you're operating in a way that's going to produce you a positive cash flow. So you know that you can meet those commitments. You know you can meet those commitments to your vendors. You know you can meet those commitments to your staff. And you know you can meet those commitments to yourself and your family. So these are all very, very important things. So pricing is really critical in that. Pricing is one of the pillars that we have control over that actually indicates whether or not we're going to be able to be profitable at the end of the day. I really like working with people on pricing at the beginning of their enterprise because I think it's really critical that we start our enterprise knowing that our pricing structure is sustainable. Sometimes that's not always the case, and we have to do a little bit of remedial tweaking there. But so wherever you are in your entrepreneurial journey, we can look at what's specific and unique in your business. So, okay, so there aren't that many levers that we have, but pricing is one of them. Let's think about it. Let's assume for a moment that we are in that position where we're struggling with our cash flow. Maybe you're checking your bank account every day to see if something came in there. Yeah, I can see some smiles around the room. We've all been there and done that. It's not a comfortable place to be. So, all right. So, if we find ourselves in that difficult position, what are some of the changes that we can make structurally with how we structure our business that can impact that? Well, let's have a think about it. So, whatever the good or service is that you sell, you can attempt to reduce the cost of producing it. So if you're making something, you can attempt to reduce the cost of the of the ingredients, the components, whatever that go into making that good. If you're delivering a service, you can attempt to reduce the cost of delivery of that service. Excuse me. Sorry about that. You can attempt to reduce the cost of that service. What else can you do? You can also attempt to reduce the cost of your other expenses. So when I'm talking about those other expenses, I'm talking about those expenses that are not directly related to manufacturing your good or providing your service, but the other stuff. Maybe it's running your office. Maybe it's your advertising budget. And I see Cheyenne go, no, not my advertising budget. But we'll talk about that because you and I are on the same side there, very much so. But there are other costs that you can look at that perhaps you can reduce. You can also look at selling more, right? If you sell more of what it is you produce, then maybe because you've got increased revenue, you can impact that bottom line. So there are certain levers that you can use there to manipulate in order to improve that position. But frankly, one of the easiest to look at is your price. Is there any room for you to charge more money? But before you get into that big picture, let's really carefully take a bit of a dive into how we come up with pricing and the important things to analyze before we establish how much we're actually going to charge. So these are the areas that we're going to take a deep dive on today. This is kind of the overview that we're going to touch on. Let's talk a little bit about why pricing matters. And you're going to hear me talk a lot about best in class and KPIs, key performance indicators. When I talk to entrepreneurs about how to structure their business, whether it's from a financial point of view or a go-to-market point of view or a process management point of view, I'm always going to encourage you to structure your business to the best in class. What do I mean about that? There are industry standards out there. Government Canada has some of those standards defined. They're hard to find on the website, but they're there. I subscribe to a website that has all of these standards, but what these standards are is a conglomeration of data that basically produces by sector, by industry, some guidelines around what your business should be operating like from a financial point of view. So it gives you some guidelines about what's the average gross profit margin in your industry? What's the average cost of operating expenses in your industry? Oh, dear. Could you excuse me just one moment, please? This is brutal, and I'll share it. Okay, so it's really important that you get a feel for what those standards are within your industry, because that's going to tell you if you're performing where you should be. And it's great to have that guideline, right? We all want to know what's normal for what I'm doing. Am I in that classification that makes me perform it in an optimal way? That's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about best in class KPIs. So when I'm talking with a group like you guys, what I'm always going to be talking about is what are those ratios that we're aiming towards that make us the best in class? Let's not aim at being in the lower quadrant within our group. Let's aim at being the best we can possibly be within our sector. So we're going to talk a little bit about that, and I'm going to refer back to best in class.
And
We're
Judith,
going to,
can I slide in?
yes.
A question in the chat was, are you going to explain where we can find those types of industry averages? Because some people are wondering, where do we find that out?
Yeah, I'll have to have a dig around. I've got the link to that. I'll send it through to Kerry after our chat, and she can send it out. There is a Government of Canada link that gives you that. It's not that great. As I say, I subscribe to, it's actually a US site that gives all of that, but you have to pay for it. But if there's one-off questions as well you want to ask me, I'll go on there and have a look for it afterwards. So just let me know and I can have a look for you. So, okay, we're going to talk about pricing and profitability. And we're going to talk a little bit about your finances. And we're going to talk a little bit about the magic line that everybody says when they're doing work with me. Oh, Judith loves to talk about that. And we hit it in the first little part of our chat when we were talking about how much it costs to actually manufacture your good or how much it costs to actually deliver your service. Most of the problems that we end up with that give us cash flow problems are not in how much we pay ourselves or our workers or how much it costs us to run our office or any of that. And definitely not Cheyenne's advertising budget, definitely never. It's actually, it actually, the problems usually happen above that magic line on the cost of what it costs us to actually produce the good and service. So we can do a bit of a deep dive into that because it's often overlooked. So we're going to have a look at that. We're going to define what is a cost of good, cost of doing business, and an operational cost. I don't know around here, Stephanie, I see you there. So you definitely perhaps have some of this. Cost of doing business. If any of you are selling through retail outlets, you're probably very familiar with this. This is a cost of putting your product on the shelf. This is a cost of subscribing to promotions. It is a cost of putting out flyers. All of these mandatory programs that maybe your distribution channel mandates that you participate in, or the retailer that you're doing business mandates that you participate in. Likewise, if you're selling your product through Amazon, Etsy, any of these platforms, there are certain mandatory costs of doing business that come into play when you're actually selling product on those channels. They can have incredible impact on your cash flow and your profitability. So we're going to have a look at that. We're then going to get into the nuance, right? We all know about this. This is the part where we tend to get kind of into the weeds a little bit, right? We say, oh my goodness, my price, or like, I can't put it past it. No, I can't. No, so-and-so down the road, that's all they charge. And my competition, and oh my goodness, in our sector. And we work ourselves up into a knot about why we couldn't possibly charge a penny more for our product or service. And again, you know what? I hate to say it, you lot, but we women are terrible at doing that because, frankly, we undervalue the worth of what it is we're doing. And we've got to get over that and move past it. So, I'm also going to talk to you a little bit, remind me if I forget with all of this yakking. I also want to talk to you a little bit about the difference between a business and a business model that's predicated on a high volume, sells lots of stuff, low margin, or on a high margin, low volume model. This is critical, and I'm going to perhaps give you a bit of a shocking figure right now, but so here goes. If your business is under $5 million in sales, 5 million, then you are operating in a market where really you should be high margin because that is considered low volume. Once you hit over the 5 million level, you can afford to play with your margins because you're looking at something called incremental sales. And that's perhaps for another class for those of you that are in that. Anybody that's perhaps in national distribution, a national product would start to hit these questions. And these are important questions to look at. But if you're below 5 million and critically below 1 million in sales, then you're really in a market where you are low volume, you're a small player, so you need a high margin. You absolutely need a high margin. What do you do to justify that high margin? You absolutely need to know what your differentiators are. And I know that in so many courses we take, we craft and we recraft our value proposition. And I watch people's eyes roll back in their head when they think about doing that one more time. But you know what? You better know your key differentiators because that's the reason, that's the value that people are paying for. So we're going to talk about that too. I'm going to talk about the fact that this is an art, not a science. Collecting data is really, 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 really important. However, at the end of the day, it's how you interpret that data that's going to make the difference. So data is important. We're going to talk about collecting data. We're going to talk about the role of data in the decision making we make, but it is an art, not a science. And you do need to be continuously monitoring and adjusting your pricing. Don't wait, and this is something else I find too. Our prices keep going up. Our supply chain goes up. The cost of transportation goes up. And we keep thinking, I don't want to pass that on. I can't possibly ask them for more money. I can't do that. Well, you know what? The Bank of You Incorporated doesn't have the money to take that on. So we do have to, and we have to be reasonable and realistic so that when pricing increases hit us, I'm not saying it's fair, but you are not the bank. You can't absorb that on behalf of your customer base. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And we're going to leave at the end, obviously, some time just to chat and have Q&A. So, all righty. So that's an overview of where we're going to go today. So let's see if the tech works. Okay. Why have I put this slide up here? This is really interesting. So what we have here is a view of two different businesses that have a lot of similarities in as much as they are both achieving $1 million in sales. Okay, you see there with the yellowy orange line, both of these two businesses that we're comparing there, they've both got $1 million in sales. I talk to lots of people and they're all very anxious to say, oh, you know, I broke my 250 this year. I broke my 500,000 this year. I broke my million. And this is great. I mean, there's no question that this is a milestone to celebrate. But here's my next few questions, which can sometimes deflate that a wee little bit. So let me tell you what I find really, really, really important. It's great to hit those sales targets, but I want to know, after you've produced your goods and your services, how much money do you have left over to run your business? Because to be perfectly honest, that's the really important figure. All right. So in the example that we're looking at here of these two companies, sister companies, they're both doing $1 million. If you look at that red column there, then you'll see that one of them, however, it's costing them 85% of their sales to produce their goods and service. 85%. Stephanie's laughing because we've had these conversations. And I see this a lot. So holy moly, people, you've just done $1 million in sales. What have you got left over to run your business? Right, 150,000. So what is your business actually worth? 150,000. Bit of a shocker, eh? So that's very much what talking about pricing hinges around. Understanding very clinically those concepts, how much it costs to make your goods or services and how much it costs to actually get them sold. So then if you have a look at the business over here on the right-hand side, you see with these folk, it's only costing them around 350,000 to make their goods and services, which is leaving them 650,000 left over to run their business. Which business would you rather run? Right, me too. I used to be a little bit ruthless about that in my business. And when we were looking at taking on new products or developing new products, and we did a lot of R&D, I used to do a future projection, obviously, of what this good or service could be sold for. And if I could not realize at least 50% in my of gross profit, that's the money left over after I've paid to make it, I didn't do it. Now, are there businesses that work on 15%? Yep. You know some of them. But we are not Jeff Bezos. And we are not, good old Galen. We are not. These are the businesses that working on 15% can make sense for. For us, that just isn't the case. So when I'm deciding what I'm going to sell, what I'm going to make, or what I'm going to deliver, this is an exercise that I go through that's extremely critical. I say, great, there's a market for out there. I've validated the market. People want it. I know they want to buy it, but what can I deliver it at? Because that's really important, isn't it, when we come to pricing, right? See how critical that is as we get down the road on our chat today and we're deciding, okay, well, how much do I sell it for? You absolutely need to know this. Now, let me nuance that a little bit further. Let's say that you're producing a range of products. Let's say you produce 10 products. If I said to you for each of those, and you're selling through retail or through whatever, you have different channels that you're selling through. Maybe you're selling on your own website through Shopify. Maybe you're selling through Amazon. Maybe you're selling to a farmer's market. Maybe you're also selling to some retail stores. If I were to say to you, can you tell me your gross profit margin, the amount of money you have left over once you've sold those goods, by SKU, by sales channel? Can you tell me that? Ooh, I'm seeing some very not only am I seeing pain faces, I'm seeing people leave the room. I have this effect on people. It's just so awful. I'm sorry. I apologize for that question. But you know what? It's so critical. So I'm going to tell you a little story about a gentleman that I work with, and Kerry knows this gentleman. He's a wonderful gentleman, and he's one of the finest fractional CFOs I know, who would be the CEO of Launch Lab, Kerry. And Scott tells this story all of the time, and he doesn't mind me using this as an example to people. So you've got a gentleman who joined his family firm, sizable business in the packaging business, and they had a plant in Cornwall, and they had a plant in the US, and they were manufacturing very special packaging for a whole range of different products. And he was a newly minted MBA and Chief Financial Officer, and he ended up with a job in his family firm. And the first thing that he did on joining that firm was he did a cost analysis of all of the different products they sold to all of the different customers they sold them to, and how much it cost them to produce all of these different packaging forms. And what he discovered is that two of the products that they were manufacturing lost money. Every time they sold the darn thing, they lost money. So at his first big board meeting with his new board, and I think it was his uncle was the CEO. I don't think it was his dad, but anyway, so hair raising for a 22-year-old recent MBA grad. He his first report to the board of directors was that his recommendation was that they close down 2 production lines. So of course they looked at him as if he's just grown 3 heads. But he hung on in there and he rolled this out and he got his point over that, in fact, making these goods was losing money. So he went through the rationalization, not just of how much it costs to make them, but also was there any elasticity in price? Sometimes the answer is no. And if there is no elasticity in price, the only decision you can make, the sensible Chief Financial Officer, is stop doing it. So in his first year as Chief Financial Officer in this firm, he took $2 million off the top line. So he closed down 2 lines, which took $2 million out of sales, and the company produced $600,000 more in profit. All they did was close 2 lines. Wow, eh? That gave them $6,000 to reinvest in R&D, producing goods that were profitable, export, whatever, you name it. That's a found amount of money to be reinvested into the business to make sure that you're growing that sustainable profitability. So I'm going to challenge you, and I want you guys to sign up for this workshop because it's just red hot. I'm going to challenge you to really become very granular about your understanding around each of your products or services, what it costs to produce and deliver them, and that by sales channel, because it can really vary. What else are we going to take a look at here? Yeah, we're going to talk about margins. We already hit on that. I'll come back to that. Let's go over it again. We talked a little bit about the levers that we have available, about the cost. I want to touch on here, and we're going to come back to it, to this mysterious thing called the cost of doing business. And this is very often hidden. And I get into debates very often. I don't know if we've got any accountants or bookkeepers on our call today, but I very often get into debates with bankers and accountants around this. If you are selling through as a national channel, and you're selling through distribution, and you're selling through platforms like Amazon and Etsy and these kinds of platforms, there is a very significant cost of doing business with those operations. And this is not a discretionary cost. So here's what happens. So let's say that you are selling through Amazon, you're selling your product, and Amazon wants to boost the sales for your product. So it actually puts you on special. puts you on promo for a 90-day period of time. So what happens with that? You have a contract with Amazon that you're selling your product at X. So you sell 3 skids worth of your product and you sell them an invoice and you send them an invoice for $30,000. And you think, isn't that great? I just made a sale to Amazon for $30,000 and they send you a check for $15,000. That is what happens. There is no debate about this. You just simply get a check for $15,000 because the mandatory promo just cost you 15. So there is no debate about this. Nobody asked you if you wanted to participate. You just get a shock when you receive the check. You also get a printout which is multiple pages long, which goes through every nickel and dime that they've deducted from you. And that can be a shipment arrived 2 days late, so that's discounted by X. A package was damaged, so that's discounted by Y. Something stale dated, so that's discounted. So you have this horrendous list of the cost of doing business, okay? It can be ginormous. And you know what? It's a racket. I would say that direct to Jeff Bezos's face, it is a racket. The way that these platforms make money is not on the contract they sign with you. It's on the add-on cost of doing business that they simply deduct from your check. And then you phone your broker or you phone your distributor and you say, what the just and they say, I'm sorry, we can't talk about that. Can I give you the link to the customer portal? Which is very often overseas, but that's a whole different story. So then, try arguing with the portal. If you don't have the money, they just simply shorted you your money and you've still got to run your business. So that's horrendous. Why do I get into an argument sometimes with our accounting friends? Because the way a lot of accountants and particularly the way a lot of when you use an outsource accounting department and they don't really understand necessarily the nuance of your business, when they're doing the accounting and they see that you sent an invoice out for $30,000 and you got a check for $15,000, they assume there was a credit note attached to that. So in other words, they assume that half of the goods that you sold, you've now got back, right? So what they do is they raise a credit note for the difference. That's how they account for it on your books. So the books balance. Otherwise, they wouldn't balance. But what that means to you is that your gross sales on your management reports, in this case, it would be your income statement, shows 15,000 less than you actually sold. So when you start to do any form of wow is right. So when you start to do any form of analytics, you're working with incorrect figures. And that whole cost of goods sold nonsense that you're dealing with is totally hidden. You don't even see it when you look at your income statement. It's all being credit noted off the top. You know what you don't see? What you don't see, you don't manage. The argument that I have with my accounting friends is that I want to see that cost of doing business right in there underneath my gross sales of how much it actually costs me to do business with those firms. So that when I have a look and I have a look at what I've got left over to run my business on, that gross profit, I can clearly see what I paid, not just in manufacturing my stuff or delivering my service, but what all of these sales channels charge me for the honor and privilege of selling my stuff on their platform or through their retail store. Managing that in a small business is incredibly critical. And when I do the analytics on small businesses, that is 9 times out of 10 where we run into problems. So have a look at that. Take a bit of a deep dive. And then there's all of the nuance. And this is what we're also incredibly familiar with. And this is what we talk about all of the time. But my competition, my customers, my everything else, the risk factors, you need to kind of turn this around. And this is where, I'm going to talk to you a lot about best in class. So this is where you want to go back and you want to say, okay, but what does the very best in class do here? Being very clear about your value proposition. Oh, this is a goodie. We're going to talk about this. Never, ever budget for a loss. Never, ever, ever. And if anybody tries to tell you that doing a loss leader is just a cost of doing business, don't do it. On rare occasions, I will go down to 15% if it's an introductory offer. Very, very rare occasions. I will never sell anything at a loss, ever, ever, ever. And I can also tell you, in my experience in business in many, many different sectors, that I have never, ever once seen discounting your product correlate to an increase in sales. Ever. So if you think that you're selling something and the only thing that's going to drive sales is price, you've got something seriously wrong with your business model. And we need to take a really deep dive into that because there is a serious problem around that. Okay, so there is no correlation between driving sales and discounting product. Collecting data, we're going to talk about that. It's extremely important to collect data. Nowadays, we have the ability to do it. Back when we didn't have all of these options, it was hard. We had to try and remember, say, why did you come to us? What did you buy? And all of that kind of stuff. Now we can collect data. Adjusting often and gradually, and then knowing your numbers and, being fair to yourself. We talked about that right at the beginning. So, okay. So let's start and go back here and have a look, do a little bit more of a deep dive. Sorry, I'm flipping around through this. Okay, so margins. Does everybody understand what I mean by margin? And does anybody here want me to talk about the difference between margin and markup?
Because I think let's assume that someone at least doesn't know. Yeah.
All right, so let's have, and I wish I had a whiteboard here. First of all, they are just different ways of expressing the same thing, okay? So margin and markup is a way of you determining how much money you're going to make from selling your good and your product. They are a variation of the same thing. We use markup usually in retail. And the reason that it's more used in retail than in other environments is very simply, it's an easier calculation to do. So let's say that you're selling a product and you buy that product for $1, right? Your cost of buying the product is $1. You're going to mark it up 300%, okay? You're going to sell it for $3, okay? So that is a markup of 300%. You've multiplied it times 300%, you're selling it for $3. When we talk about margin, and you'll find that I always talk about margin, just because it's my sector, and if any of you want me to sort of convert that to margin going through, I easily can. When we're talking about margin, we're looking at exactly that same math, but we're doing it in a slightly different way. And what I'm now going to be asking myself is I'm going to say that $1 that in retail it cost me to buy it, that is my cost of good sold. The $3 that I'm selling it for is now my gross sales, okay? So my sale is $3. It cost me $1. What have I got left over to run my business? $2. Okay, $2 is 66% of $3. So the difference between margin and markup is just simply where you apply the percent. I always look at margin. I want to know what is the percentage of money I've got left over after I sold it to run my business. That's margin. Markup is I paid $1 for it. I sold it for $3. I marked it up for 300%. What that fails to give you is your gross profit. How much do I have left over to run my business after I've sold it? So that's why I really focus on that. Because isn't that what's important? What's important is what you've got left over to run your business. So that's the difference. You're looking at exactly the same figures. It's just the math and how you're doing them. I would say to you that even if you are in retail, it's extraordinarily important that you know how much money you've got left over to run your business, your gross profit line. Plus, particularly if you're subject to any of those cost of doing business charges that we were just talking about. So maybe you're buying through a particular vendor that puts their product on special and you're obliged to swallow those specials. That's the cost of doing business. All of those things, it's very, very important. So the critical figure for me, for anybody in business, is always how much do you have left over to run it by. So any more questions about that? Was that clear? It's clear, yeah. People mystify it, but it really isn't. So, okay, back to the levers. How can we impact this if we're in a cash flow problem? We're not making as much money as we possibly can. We said, increase the sales. Increasing sales costs an investment. Now, let me tell you that I have this reputation for being a numbers lady. And I am. And I know numbers very, very well, and I am very analytical. But I know numbers because I understand that it's necessary in order to manage a business. Let me tell you what I am at heart and by instinct. I am a business development person. What wakes me up every morning with a spring in my step is going, oh boy, how do I lift the sales today? What new product lines can I add that are going to make me grow my business? What R&D can I put in there to see what new products I can bring to market? Can I expand my market? Do I expand out of the local area into Ontario, international? Can I start dipping my toe in the United States? Can I start to look at my export markets? To the core of me, I am by instinct a business development person. And if it's not growing to me, it's going backwards. And this is why I have so much respect for my colleagues in sales and marketing, because this is a fundamental pillar of the business that drives your business forward. So a very, very important thing always to look at in your business is your go-to-market strategies. How can you increase your sales? How can you increase your sales profitably? Of course, it's the $6 million question. So you can also look at increasing your price. And we talked about that. One of the very simplest ways, frankly, to produce more money is to increase your price. Dependent on what it is that you're selling, I would honestly suggest you look at this quarterly. It is much, much better for you to inch up your prices slowly if you're getting margin erosion, your gross margins are being squeezed, your cost of production is being squeezed, to ease up these prices slowly, then you suddenly realize that you've got a product that's losing you money, or it's making you so little money you may as well not be providing it and say, oh my God, I'm going to have to pass on a 20% increase. You will get consumer pushback if you do that. If you edge it up as you go along and you get some consumer pushback, you have a very defensible position. And that position is, I am so sorry, but look at the costs that we have. And I have no choice. And I have said, you know, I don't want to pass this along to you, my client. We think the world of you. But I've also got to look after my staff, and I'm a small business owner, and I've got to make sure that I'm being fair to the business as well. So I'm really sorry. In these inflationary times, I do have to look at a slight cost increase. That's a lot easier than a 20% jump. So I would suggest to you that you review that on a quarterly basis. I would put that on my once a quarter agenda. For another workshop, I talk a lot about quarterly objectives, and that's one of them that should always be there. What else can you do? You can negotiate with your vendors and try and reduce the cost of your goods. Good luck with that. Anyone had a lot of luck with that? Yeah, me neither. So, but you can, you can have a go at that. You can try and cut your cost of manufacturing or your cost of delivering. In the manufacturing sector, which I was in, you can look, and this is a long-term investment, it's capital investment. You can obviously look at automation. Um, Also, you can look at the impacts and the benefits of generative artificial intelligence and how you can apply that to your business, which has potentially incredible impact on how you deliver your services. And one of our wonderful weekend group is doing a totally amazing pivot on their business and really automating a tremendous amount of their business that used to use an awful lot of human capital, and is really catapulting that business into a totally new sphere. So this is quite amazing what one can do through automation and AI. So these are all ways that you can reduce your costs, you're saving more, so there's more margin there for you. And you can intrude it. Yeah.
I thought I'd just jump in here because this conversation comes up a lot, especially for those who are buying products to make products or to resell. And of course, this idea that if you're buying a minimum order, you're going to be charged a lot more than if you buy more, like if you buy in bulk,
Yes.
right? And so just that and not everyone's able to buy in bulk, but of course, the more you're able to buy, the more usually the lower the price. So I thought I'd slide that in because I know that's a conversation that comes up a lot.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And it's one of those issues that the bigger guys out there get the better prices, which gives them a price advantage. And it really sucks. But from the manufacturer, from the vendor supplier's point of view, they want more people with greater distribution. So they're going to reward the bigger players out there. It makes it really hard for us small people to get off the ground. But Kerry is 100% right. If you can maximize the leverage that's available to you to buy in bulk, then that's terrific because that decreases your costs. It's sometimes hard when you're in a small business because again, if you're buying a quantity that you know it's going to take you a year before you've turned that product, that's sat there, it's sat in your inventory, so it is an asset on your books, and that's something else we can get into later, but you're tying up that cash flow. So it's a double-edged sword. Again, one of our group lucked into the most amazing thing just before COVID, and she was offered a whole bunch of scientific components that a manufacturer of hers in China had manufactured in bulk by mistake. So she was offered a literally container load of these components that were incredibly expensive at like less than half price. And I said, "You have the cash flow?" She said, "Yeah, buy them." And then COVID hit. Nobody else could buy the darn things. How lucky was she? Anyway, so you look into those things occasionally, and yes, absolutely. There's that buying power that you have. If you can leverage that, absolutely go for that. But then part of what we were talking to there too, in terms of AI and automation, is improving processes and making your processes more efficient. And again, it's not for today. I do a lot of work in process management, and how you go about doing that. It's not nearly as complicated as people think. Everything I do is pretty simple. We can talk about process management another. All right, so now I want to have some ideas from you guys. In terms of the pricing that you are currently offering in the marketplace, how confident do you feel about it? And I'd like to hear from some of you who really think that your pricing is bang on the mark and why you think it is, and some of you who perhaps are a little bit concerned about your pricing point and why. So let's just play with those ideas a bit, and then we're going to talk about some of these nuances in here. Anyone going to jump in first?
You can put your a note in the Zoom chat. You can raise your hand is probably the best way. And when I say raise your hand, I mean use your reaction button. Thanks, Chas, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry, no, I'm like, oh God, I'm just jumping in and I came in late, so
No,
I'm really
please
sorry about
do.
that.
Please do. That's what I want. I just want a conversation around this.
When I came into this, I was extremely confident about it. And going into my first program with I think it was Your Way, which is what led me to here, which was incredible because I knew nothing about any of the institutions or organizations. It was literally just the universe was plopping things into my lap as I needed them, which was pretty incredible from where I came from. So I just knew that I had a plan and I just was winging it and running with it. But I knew what I wanted to put into the universe versus what was there, and I knew my value. And then throughout this process, I'm an emotional person, so I'm sorry about that.
Okay, you're a good chance.
I guess finding out that the same people that you receive injuries from that you have to go through to sell your product to be able to get it to the actual people that you actually designed it for, because you experienced it, being I don't like this terminology, but I'm sorry, I come from the street, so being cock-blocked, I guess you would say, or stonewalled or whatever have you, from these organizations by them saying that it's too expensive for them to have for their programs, knowing that the value isn't for them, the value is for their actual clients, has kind of taken me aback. And then so now I had to like kind of scurry and be like, sit on it for the past 2 years now, basically, and attempt to do other things so that I'm not continuously devaluing myself, which is exactly what the intention of that was, to generate industries, I guess you would say, to have this, mental health boom that we're having, if you will. And so I'm not quite sure how to navigate around that, knowing full well that I'm not willing to devalue myself anymore, within those organizations or that industry, I guess, if
Yeah,
that makes
Judith,
sense.
how would you address if others are not seeing the value, and we're talking about artwork in this case as well
No,
specifically. Thanks, Chas.
yeah, sorry, artwork, but it has therapeutic value to it. So they see the value in it. They know the value's there. It's just that their hands are tied, I guess, through their organizations, I guess, maybe.
Okay,
Is that a
great.
better way of wording it?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Judith, what are your
Thank
thoughts?
you.
Yeah, and Chaz, you've defined your non-negotiables there, which is great. You understand the value of what you're producing, and you're not going to discount that value. And I commend you for that, because that's really, really important. You see, what's happening when you're going through other organizations in order to deliver to your end user, to the person that you actually want to impact, is that you're paying for the profit percentage of those organizations, even if they're not for profits. Not for profits make money too, guys. Okay, just let me put that out there. We have to. We all work as not for profits within budgets. So the difficulty that you've got there, Chaz, as I'm reading it at the moment, is not necessarily that your end product is too high for the end market, but it's just that in your process of delivery, so the sales channels that you're going through, because you're working through, I don't know if you're working through agency providers or whatever, once those folk have taken their cost of administration out of the equation, then it's hard to deliver your product and service in a costly way that suits their financial. So that's I think where the rub is coming for you. And
Correct.
I would be pleased to take a deeper dive with
Yeah,
you.
and I think that the boot camp, which I just put into the Zoom link again, and Chas, I know you came a bit late, so I put it again so you can see. We are launching a boot camp to go deep into some of these topics.
Yes.
But for
Yeah.
time today, I want to go to Penny. I want to go to Danielle. I want to get to
Yeah.
Ismail. Chas, you've hit on something really spectacular. So yeah, just a reminder, the Zoom link is in there as well. Penny, we'll go to you next. Thanks, Chas.
Thank you.
Hi, Penny.
Hi, good morning. So I took my life coaching through an organized University of California in Davis, and through the International Coaching Federation, and the information that I've seen there and from my instructors, they're saying that the industry standard, the low level, is 150 US an hour.
Right.
And I've been doing some market research here and talking to women, and what I'm hearing is about $100 an hour, which I feel way more comfortable about than 150, whatever that equate to in Canadian dollars. So it's a little bit of, you know, reaching out to the community, but it's also, you know, what feels right inside. I had it down to 90, and then I put it up to, I'm sitting at 100, and I feel okay about it. But I also have joined an organization called Authentic Ship, which does a sliding scale. So it goes from $0 depending on what your, or $10, sorry, depending on what your income is, to another amount. So because I can do the coaching virtually, and I realize that my clientele may not be just local, it could be in other countries. I guess this is kind of the piece where I don't know if the word grappling with, or yeah, a question around.
Okay, let me sort of give you some food for thought about that. I'm really pleased you spoke up, Penny, because you're selling time. Is really, you're in a consulting function and you're selling time. So here's the basis around how you price a consulting business. You have a look at your potential billable hours. Okay, so if that's just yourself, or if there are others that are consulting on your behalf, and you say, okay, self, my billable hours per week are 30, because you know you're not going to bill 40, because obviously you've got, you know, all of the other stuff you need. So let's say hypothetically that your billable hours are 30, and you know what your costs are, because we've been through this exercise. You know how much it costs to deliver that service, all the rest of it. So you're going to sell 30 hours worth of service. You know how much money you have to make to deliver that. So you simply take all of that money that you need to make, divide it by the 30 hours. That's your cost, right, for delivery. And then you say, how much do I need to make on top of that to run my business, to pay myself, to pay for all of the other stuff that needs to be paid for? And that, frankly, becomes your basic minimum pay rate. Now, then the nuance is, okay, so that's how much I have to make to operate this business so that it sustains me and my family. Then you start to look at the market, and this is when you're having these interesting questions. How much are they paying in California? How much do they pay in Ontario? You also had an interesting nuance there. How much do they pay because you're doing some overseas work in different countries? These are very valid research points that you need to be knowledgeable about. Because if you're going to go above the average, you better be able to delineate why your service is worth more than the average. And that is different regionally, and you will have those market pressures regionally. What I will always suggest to you and anybody else, regardless of the sector they're in, make sure from the get-go that what you're paying covers your costs and gives you enough money left over to run your business. Otherwise, we've really got to rethink the business model, right? And we would say, okay, is there another way that I can deliver this that makes sense? Shan, remind me to talk before we start about freemium. before we leave to have a 2-minute conversation about that, but not now. But I see Danielle. Danielle has her hand up. I hope that helped, Pen.
Again, another great boot camp question.
Yeah,
But it's a
absolutely.
good one.
Yeah.
It's a good one.
It's a very complex topic, and I love getting to this point where we can start to drill down because it's really critical.
Go ahead, Danielle. Oh, we can't
Okay.
hear you.
Oh,
Oh, there you are. Yes, I can hear you now.
there you are.
You
Okay,
can hear
I
me?
hear you.
Okay. I'm never sure when I'm using the earbuds. So I make everything myself in-house, including like packaging and all of those things. But a big factor for me is incorporating, like making sure I am adding in a livable wage so that
Yes.
when I like at a point in time when I'm paying someone else to do it,
Yes.
that that's already built into the price, so that suddenly, 2 years from
Yeah.
now, and I hire somebody, that like the price doesn't have to double, and I sometimes I get a little bit of pushback of like set when I say that, but like somebody needs to be paid, and I'm gonna pay myself now, but like when I'm not making it anymore, the business still needs to be profitable, right? And that's something that like I think a lot of people forget about, but also I think it's important that we're thinking about these things now than panicking later when we need to hire somebody and there's no budget to hire them, but because we didn't incorporate it into the price.
Oh, Danielle, can you come to all of my sessions and say that over and over and over and over again, please? You are so right on. And I would also add to that you need to be paying yourself at least a living wage. You are so absolutely right on. And the other thing that we all need to do, and sometimes we don't, is that if we're in businesses, small businesses, mostly owner operated, there will come a time that we want to turn over to our next, whether that's a retirement or whatever that looks like. We also have to make sure that this revenue source that we currently have is sustaining our needs for the future. So if this business that you're operating today is going to be the major source of your retirement fund, that also needs to be factored in there. Because again, I come back to that old thing. You need to be fair to your clients and your customers, but you need to be fair to you and your family as well. So right on 100%. I absolutely agree with you.
Love
Okay.
it. Judith,
That's
I'll signal we have 20 minutes left.
Oh gosh, okay. Sorry about that. I do this. You have to tell me to shut up. Yeah. All right. So looking at these KPIs are really different and it depends on the sectors. And I'm already getting a really great feel that we've got all kinds of people in all kinds of different businesses here. But they are really important that we pull them out. And they are indeed part of this whole question around pricing. Because again, and I think you've got a feel for it already, it's about knowing the facts. So it's about making those strategic decisions, knowing the facts, and knowing the impact that you're going to have when you make those pricing decisions as you move forward. So what kind of return on investment do you expect to get from your sales and marketing effort? This is really, really critical. And I see my friend grinning there again, which is great. But it really is. Running a business costs an investment. One of the things I see time and time again is that we start up our businesses and generally speaking, we bootstrap because it's really hard to go out there and raise capital. It just simply is. And I also do an interesting session on the difference between acquisition, buying a business and starting a business. And we look at the relative finances there and we look at the marketing pros and cons of both. But we usually end up bootstrapping, because of a financial edict. And that financial edict is I don't have a lot of money. I've put in everything that I possibly can. I'm bootstrapping. Maybe we've gone to family and friends and we have a small investment there, which always weighs heavily on us because we have that moral indebtedness to make sure our family and friends are repaid. So we've started with not a lot of money. So I see a lot of people do the basics. They create usually a lovely website. Often they'll get going on social, but they actually have no strategy to drive sales. So it is the ultimate of build it and they will not come, because nobody knows that you actually exist. So there has to be, when you're starting at the beginning of your enterprise, there has to be a budget for sales and market, and there has to be an expectation of return for sales and market. And you have to really monitor that, because without that, you derive no cash flow, right? Unless you create sales, all of this is just, well, it's a bit of a fantasy. So I see that time and time again. So knowing what your sales and marketing budget is, having targets for sales and marketing, analyzing the data of the ROI, your expectations, that has to be in everybody's KPI. And I know I can talk to you about 90-day sprinting. It should be there every 90 days. You need to know the cost of acquiring a new customer. How much does it cost? Because if you know that right now you're doing 100,000 a month, and really to get up past your break even, you need 200,000, and you know that onboarding every new customer is $1, then you know you've got to put 100,000 to the marketplace. It becomes somewhat mathematic. I'm not saying entirely. There's a qualitative component here always. But
Judith, just to clarify,
yeah.
you're saying that the cost to acquire a new customer or a customer would be your sales divided by your marketing costs. Is that correct?
No, it will be your marketing cost divided by your new customers.
This is why you're the math girl. Thank you. Good. I'll write that in the comments, but I want to make sure. Okay, marketing divided by
new customers. Yeah. So so I'm going to digress a wee bit. So there is a rule of thumb when you're looking at marketing budgets that kind of separates your viewpoint from existing customers and how much it costs to maintain them, keep them coming back, which hopefully should be lower than acquiring new customers, which is incremental business, what you're adding on. You need to measure both, but for the argument that we're going through here now, you want to know what it costs you to actually get new customers to start buying from you. That's cost of acquisition. So you need to know the cost of customer turnover. If you lose a customer, what are those costs? You need to know the reoccurring revenue, the level of customer satisfaction, the new markets, and all of these things. This is how you start to get really nuanced and granular about how you're managing your business, and you start to really understand the levers that you can use in order to be able to grow your business. So in the business that I was in before, prior to manufacturing, straight out of college, I ended up quite by chance in the staffing industry, and I joined a staffing company, which is a global staffing company, Canadian. Drake International, Canadian company owned by a gentleman called Bill Pollock, an old mentor of mine. Brilliant person. So Bill started this company back in, I don't know, 1950, something like that, on a very interesting premise, which was actually that there were not sufficient women in the workforce. And he wanted to create a vehicle whereby women could balance working and their life responsibilities. So he started a concept of what we now think of as temporary or contract work, which allowed women to look after their family responsibilities and work the kind of hours that would suit them. So flexible hour schedule all the way back then. Yeah. He was a brilliant kind of guy. And he was a statistician by profession. And way back then, when I worked for him, which was in the 90s, he knew these statistics so well, and we all did. We lived and died by them. Before the days of big data, that I could tell you, for instance, if somebody said to me, okay, we need to recruit 12 accountants in Vancouver to do a project for 9 months starting on, I could tell you how much money I had to spend in the Vancouver sun in a February if it was raining to likely onboard those people. That's how statistically driven it was. And most businesses, you can get close to that. You don't necessarily have to get that close. But so, yes, so understanding numbers and knowing how to leverage them are really, really critical. So they're the kind of KPOs that we look for. And then I said to you, always aim for best in class. Please don't aim to just get by. Please don't aim to break even. Aim to be best in class. Aim to be that person that sleeps well at night, knowing that you've rendered a fantastic service to your client, to your customer, fantastic products, and you don't have to worry about your bank account. And how do you do that? You have to be very, very clear about your value proposition. What really does differentiate you? You know, what is the hill that you can die on as far as your price is concerned? That is really, really critical.
Judith,
And
a
remember,
question from Stephanie in the Zoom chat. Sorry to interrupt.
no worries.
And I'll just signal we have 10 minutes left. But she asked, how do you figure out the cost of customer turnover?
Yeah, so what you have to do is you take the sales that you're losing. So let's say that you had a customer that bought $10,000 worth of product in the year, and you lose that customer. Okay, so then you say if you take your total sales and marketing budget, what does it cost to replace that customer? So it's a way of looking not just at the revenue that you've lost, but the cost of acquisition of the new customer to replace that revenue. So it's back to a cost of acquisition. So what you've got with a lost customer is you've got a double whammy. You've got the lost revenue that you're dealing with, and you've also got the cost of replacement. That's expensive. You have to really aim at never losing customers. Sometimes, obviously, they move on and whatever. It happens. But in terms of putting together your quality assurance and your customer experience, 100% customer retention is a biggie. I'm not going to get into that because it's not really relevant, but it's the same thing of what is the cost of if you lose an employee. It's huge because it's not just the cost of the productivity that you've lost with the employee, but it's the cost of replacing the employee. So anyway, so they're the kinds of mathematical equations that you need to look at. Anybody else got any questions?
I also want to make sure you have time to chat about the boot camp before we close. We have about less than 10 minutes.
Ooh, I'm going the wrong way. Okay, is that it? Yeah.
If anybody has any questions, put them in the Zoom chat while Judith is speaking, and we'll try to fit in what we can.
All right, so I hope as many of you possibly can join me for the boot camp. So here's the idea that I have, and as you know, I'm kind of flexible. So here we go. What I'd like to do for everybody that gets their application into Kerry, that's really, really important, is we're going to have a discovery meeting. And dependent on how many of you guys sign up, I might group you. If there's a bunch of you in a very similar kind of industry, I might say, okay, let's all of us meet together, because obviously we need to be sort of time aware about this. What I want to do is to get to know each of you pretty well, so I know what your key concerns are, and I have a very clear understanding about your industry. And I need to know that. I need to know what's really important for you guys, because that's going to obviously color where I go in terms of the actual delivery of the bootcamp. And we're going to go through very much the overview that we've done today. So today was, very much a high level look at the kind of things we look at. But what I'll make sure I do after our discoveries is I'll be very specific about the industries that you're in and how they relate to your industry and to your particular enterprise. Because here's what I want at the end of the day, and we've got 3 workshops that we're going to roll out bi-weekly. Yeah, bi-weekly. I want at the end of that period of time for each of us to be able to feel really solid, not just about our pricing, but our pricing strategy. How to analyze it, go forward, how to adjust it, how to really feel solid about it if you're getting pushback, all of those things. So that to me is my end goal and your takeaway, that you walk away from this workshop feeling, from these group of workshops, this boot camp, feeling very, very confident about this. And knowing that you can take this forward in a sustainable way, your enterprise is going to make money, you feel confident about your pricing structure, and you know how to work with it. So that's kind of it. It's very much a hands-on thing. That's my style. Interactive. Bring all of your issues. Let's share them and let's learn from each other. I think that's a critical part of doing these. And, you know, Perry's wonderful masterclasses have shown us that learning from each other is a critical learning too. So I encourage everybody to share. It's a very participative process. So
Right.
I do hope that you can all join me there. It's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun, and I think you'll all go away feeling great about where you are in your
I
business.
can attest that anyone who's worked with Judith says it's one of the best decisions they made. And so I love that Judith made that note that we have to stop living a fantasy and start getting real about our business. Because if we don't want to run an expensive hobby and we actually want this to be, as Danielle said, a living wage, something that supports us in our, you know, our family. Yeah, not a jobby, as Cheyenne says. We want to, this is a great way to do that. And I mean, we have no doubt that this is, if it works for your schedule, and that's why I did put the dates in there. But go ahead and take a look at that. Any final question that someone might want to ask as we are wrapping up today? We'll do what we can in the time remaining, because Judith's time.
I used to do something really wicked in my business. I do have a little bit of a debt in my day. If there were areas of my business that I really wasn't sure, if could bear some price increasing, I did used to just inch it up, and I used to keep inching it up by 5% every month until people started screaming.
There you go.
You would be amazed how many times people never screamed.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. Yeah, and so Muriel is saying that she keeps coming up against jewelers who are offended that she wants to make a living with her work and not just socialize because they're maybe retired. And so, yeah, it is important that in our mind, it's a mindset shift from this is not a hobby, this is a business, and the difference between the two is profit. And that's exactly what Judith has been hitting on today.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, so I haven't seen any final questions. I think people are just hoping to get into that boot camp so we can get started. The good news, it does start this month. And so, yeah, thank you, Judith. You are an unending fountain of wisdom. And I know that your time is highly valuable as well, and that you have many folks that you are going on to help today after this workshop. So I do want to thank you so much for giving us your time today. And again, just hit the link, watch your newsletter as well. And if you have a friend that maybe is interested, maybe it doesn't work for you, but maybe you know of another woman identifying business owner who's in the Kingston region, then that might be a great fit. So you're getting thank yous from all around. Thank you to all of you who showed up for your business today. I just want to throw that out because it's easy to, you know, sign up for a workshop and it's easy to get distracted. Some are real distractions and sometimes we just don't show up. I think today, those of you who showed up, this is going to be a game changer. So thank you, Judith. And thank you to everyone who showed up today. Have a fantastic day, everyone.
Take care, you guys.